Benedikt, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here.
You're coming to us all the way from, as you described it, you said the middle of nowhere in Germany.
Yep, that's right. Yeah, the southeast of Germany, close to the Czech border and the Austrian border. It's the Bavarian Forest National Park. I think it's the biggest forest area of Europe. It's all forests and mountains everywhere around me. Yeah.
We're going to get into that, of course, but let's start with the state of the state. Let's talk about what's day-to-day for you.
So I'm a full-time mixing engineer. I run a mixing studio called Outback Recordings. I've been doing that for almost 15 years now. I used to do, we get into that, but it was not always just mixing. I used to do full production. Now it's just mixing full-time. I'm do that with a partner here at the studio. So Thomas is working with me. He used to be my assistant. Now he is just co-mixing with me, prepping sessions for me. So we are two people in the studio. And then I also started a education platform called the Self-Recording Band, where we have a podcast. Been doing that for a couple of years, and we help self-recording bands make records from their home studios and jam spaces, and we do that through online courses, one-on-one mentoring, coaching. That's kind of what we do. So this side thing that it used to be turned into an actual second business, and now I'm kind of working two full-time things, and it's fun, but it's also a lot.
And I assume that a few of those self-recording bands end up becoming mix clients.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, let's come back to that. Tell us about where you grew up and what your upbringing was like in terms of music and technology. Was that even a factor?
I grew up here where I live still to this day, in Bavaria. My mom was like a music fan more than anything. She's very musical and all that, but she'd never played an instrument or had any interest in that. My dad, however, was a guitar player and also played the piano, and he had a recording studio when I was young. Just for a couple of years, and it never worked out for him. That's why he also didn't want me to start a recording studio. But yeah, he did that for a while. I remember that a little bit because I was very young when that was the case. But he gave some of his old equipment to me when I was young. I had an Atari computer in the 90s and the early 90s, and I had a little mixing desk with a couple of channels and a couple of microphones. And then, yeah, I learned to play the piano at a young age, and then the guitar, and I played around with these toys, and I kind of fell in love pretty much immediately. And so they tried to stop me, but I obviously they failed. Yeah.
They were supportive, but
Yeah.
not really enthusiastic about you getting involved in the world of audio.
Yeah, the funny thing is my mom, both of them were supportive always. My mom especially, she didn't try to stop me actually, but my dad was just very careful because he failed. I mean, I only know it from his stories, but there was apparently some issue with a business partner that he ran the studio with together, and he got burned and had some bad experiences, and he just came to the conclusion that the whole model doesn't really work or is not something that he wants me to do, basically. And I can understand that from his perspective, but it was more like he was trying to protect me, and it was his dream, so he definitely understood my dream. He just wanted to protect me, and yeah, he was supportive, but he also would have preferred for me to have a normal job, I guess.
What does he think of what you're doing now?
He's really proud and supportive, and it took a long time for that to happen, to be honest. That was something I guess I was honestly a little bit struggling with for the most part of my life, because I always was I wanted nothing more than hear him say good job, well done, I'm proud of you, whatever. And that really never, it took a long time for that to happen, but then it happened, and it's great, but it took a while.
Did you go to school for music or recording at all?
Kind of, but not really. So I went to school, and while I was in school, I was already touring with a band that I had. I grew up in the hardcore punk scene. So after having played the piano and all that, I discovered hardcore and punk rock, fell in love, skateboarded all day, listened to that kind of bands, and then did my own band. And while I was still in school, we were already starting to tour, and then we got signed to a small label that was really cool, and then we played shows all over Europe. And I started recording our own demos, and we started DIYing things. I had no idea what I was doing at the time, but I just loved it. And then some friends' bands, wanted me to do their demos, the typical way that it often happens, I guess. And then I still didn't even think about, I didn't even think it was a possibility, like a reasonable thing or realistic thing for me to do as a job. So after school, I went to university and I dropped out after 3 semesters. I'd studied something completely unrelated. I just did it because I thought I had to do something, but all I really did was make music. And then after 3 semesters, I just dropped out. Then I tried again, and this time I picked something that was related, and I went to, it would be, the literal translation of it would be media technologies, is what I studied there. And part of that was audio. The audio part was, for me at the time, very easy and very basic. It was fun, but also very basic. I finished that part, but then also dropped out and didn't finish the whole thing because all I did was be in my studio all day and played with my band all day. And then after the second time, I thought I won't try a third time. I just have to accept the fact that this is what I want to do. I didn't want to give myself a plan. I never gave myself a plan B, really. And then I just started doing it as my job and jumped in full time. And yeah, so I went to school for a little bit, but not really.
When was the first, let's call it professional experience, either as a player or as an engineer, where you witnessed it and not within the confines of your dad's world?
Yeah, I remember that totally. So most things I've done, I already got paid a little bit, and it was in that sense, it was semi-professional, whatever, but it wasn't really good, and I knew that. And our band was relatively well known in the scene here, and I had a lot of bands that knew me and that liked my stuff. They hired me, but I would listening now to those records, that wasn't really professional, and I also didn't treat it like that. But then there was this one record that I did about 15 years ago. That was also friends of mine. They wanted me to produce their record, and I co-produce, engineer, and then who I thought I was mixing it, but that turned out to be different then. So I worked with them. They were a really cool band. I liked them a lot. I recorded the tracks, or we started the production, pre-production and all that. And then they told me they would hire a different mixer because they really took it seriously, and they wanted a certain person to mix this. This was a well-known mixer from Germany. Thomas Heimann Tosin is his name. He had a couple of chart hits and stuff. And yeah, they hired this mixer. And I was kind of bummed because I thought I really wanted to mix this record. This could have been my first kind of a little bit of a bigger record maybe. And so... But they hired him, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me one of the best things, because that mixer was so supportive, and that was kind of my first mentoring experience, because he helped me record much better tracks. He gave me so much feedback on the stuff that I was doing with the band. He didn't dictate what we were doing. He respected that we were producing this together, but he spent so much time telling me, I'm hearing this comb filtering thing on the cymbals. You might want to place the overhead slightly differently, or what did you do on that snare? Can we do something about the tuning there? And he just helped me so much and helped me capture better tracks and gave me such valuable feedback. And then also when the mixes came back, it sounded so much better than anything that I would have been able to do back then. And so the record really did well for the band. It worked out for them. And I was super happy that I was part of that whole experience. And that kind of was the start of everything else, because then I realized I need to get out of my bubble here. I need to stop doing things in a vacuum on my own, and I need to reach out to true professionals, and I need to learn a lot and just ask a lot of questions and get a lot of feedback. And so that was my first professional experience, and a very important one. Yeah.
So where did you take that? What was the plan? How did you manage your geographic disadvantage?
Yeah, it is one. So first of all, I recorded everyone around here. I was the only one doing it all the time, basically. And I was okay with struggling financially and all that for quite a while. So I just did recording, mixing, everything all day, every day. And I recorded everyone with a pulse who wanted to record something, and everyone in the area, and all kinds of genres, all kinds of things, from voiceover to all kinds of music. I did everything. That was one thing. And then with the mentoring part and getting help, is I just reached out to studios and people that were recommended to me, or I just sent a lot of emails and did a lot of calls, and I just asked if I could go there and take a studio tour, and I was of course pay for that. Or so in one case, I that was kind of an experience as well. I asked the mastering engineer that I really liked if he could master a song, and I asked if I could attend the session, and it was just one single. So he just laughed and said, like, I mean, for one single, an attended session, I don't really know if that's like, maybe if you do a full record and you just spend half an hour here, like, okay, I got it. And then I hired him to do a full record. I drove there, I sat down, I didn't say anything, I just watched, and then he let me do a couple of A/B tests, and then I did the same thing with a couple of studios, and I just did whatever I could to drive a lot to other studios, sit in on sessions, learn. And then also pay people to like mix something for me that I've produced, and then also get feedback. And I tried everything I can to just pick people's brains. And then at some point I started a podcast, not the one that I'm doing now, but an interview podcast that had the same name as my studio. It was the Outback Recordings podcast. And I interviewed people from our scene, like the punk rock and hardcore scene, but also label people and also audio people. And that was kind of my way of being able to spend time with people that knew much more than me and to be able to pick their brains. And I put a lot of effort into promoting that podcast so that I could provide value to them. And the podcast did relatively well. So I got some decent, really cool guests on there. And that was my kind of mentoring hour every week, where I just got to pick the brains of amazing people and learn from them also. So I just did whatever I could in my location to just learn from others without having to be there all the time.
Was that podcast in German?
Except for the international guests, yes. So There are a couple of American guests and like English episodes, but many of them were German, yeah.
What became of that podcast?
It's still out there, but I don't do it anymore just because I don't have the time to do two shows. And what happened was that I met Malcolm, who was my co-host for the podcast that I'm doing now. And he said, hey, at that time when I met him, I was already many years into this, and I've worked with a lot of people from all over the world as a mix engineer. And then he was like, hey, you're working with so many self-recording bands that you mix for, and you get really good results from those home recordings. You should do another podcast where we talk about that and just help more people get better results when they do that. And I was very skeptical. I didn't want to stop the old thing. I didn't want to start a new thing. I was very happy with where I was at. But something about it sounded interesting, and then he wanted to do it with me. And so eventually I stopped the old podcast, started the new one, and that has turned into a whole new business that I'm doing now. And I'm very grateful that he taught me into this.
So let's talk about that a bit, because I think that, objectively, when you tell me this, I think, oh, wow, that's a huge audience.
Yeah.
A much broader audience than, say, the pro audio community who may listen to working class audio. It's a big audience because it's bands who are seeking to improve their own situation, take control of their own situation. And many of those bands might be in the middle of nowhere, trying to make records in, we'll call them, studio deserts, where there are no studios, or it's just too long of a drive. So tell me about your experience with that and what you've learned from helping bands record themselves.
I've learned a lot, and you're right, it is a bigger audience. It is also completely different compared to what I thought it was when I started it. And my beliefs around what is possible as a self-recording band and how to get there have also changed. So it's very interesting. First of all, I thought, like, I was a self-recording band, so I kind of understood where they were coming from, and I could just share my own story and help people avoid the mistakes that I've made. I mean, the platform is called the Self-Recording Band, but I honestly believe that there are many ways of self-recording or self-producing, and that there is no such thing as a successful, like, self-recording band that really does everything themselves. I think the ones that get really great results know what they can do themselves well, and they know what they need help with, and they will work with certain types of professionals, or get some help, or ask someone for feedback. Like, I'm very rarely seeing someone, actually never really, someone trying to do it all themselves without any external help. That just either takes forever or it just doesn't work in most cases. So the main thing that I learned, and this is also quite interesting, is in the beginning, I thought I didn't even want to teach mixing, although I was a mixing engineer. I wanted to teach or help people record better at the source, so that then when they hire someone to mix their tracks, they can do better work. And I thought, like, focus on the things you can do. It's already hard enough to be your own producer and engineer and songwriter and musician and all of that. So do that well, and then let someone else mix it. That was kind of my idea of a self-recording band. Turns out that everyone in my audience, like 90%, want one thing, and that is learn to mix. And so the challenge now for me is to, in a way, give them what they want so that I can then give them what they actually need. Because if I go out there and say, ignore the mixing part, start at the source, write better songs, be a better musician, capture better source tracks, then that might be right, but nobody's interested. And so if I help them get, good rough mixes, or at least like some quick wins that sound better than what they have been doing before in terms of mixing, then they start trusting me a little more. They are excited about it. And then I can work with them on the actual problems. And that is the interesting thing. And I wish I could just be like, hey, ignore the mix for now. Let's start at the source. But nobody's really interested in that. And I don't know why that is, but everyone seems to want to mix.
I'm trying to imagine how one would start a podcast like this, what you would focus on, and then what the reality is of what the audience gives you back and says, hey, can you talk about, tell me about those early days of what was happening with the show.
Yeah, so we just talked about, basically, like at the beginning, there was no strategy or anything at all. Malcolm and I just brainstormed and talked about things we wanted to talk about. And we said, hey, last week, this or that happened with the song that we mixed for that artist. And we shared that story on the podcast and told people what we did to fix it, or how we worked with the artist to avoid it in the first place, and just shared stories from our day-to-day work. Then we went through topics that we just, that just happen over and over again, typical mistakes that people make, or easy things that people could improve, where people could improve their results quickly and without, having to spend a lot of money more than anything. That's also part of it. And so we just experimented with that. And then we got feedback on some episodes, and like people told us to do more of that, and other episodes didn't do as well. And we just listened to that and developed it. And then we got better and better at this. And then at some point, we learned about, keyword research and certain popular topics that people want to know about. But we never really stopped talking about the things that we do every single day. And those episodes tend to do really well. And we just share the things that we do anyways, plus a little more strategy now than it used to be in the beginning.
Are there common topics that the audience was asking about?
When I look at the numbers and which of the episodes are the most popular, it is things like how to get the low end right, or how we EQ kick drums or snare drums, or like pretty narrow, specific, actionable things, or things that people just search for a lot on the internet. So those tend to do well in terms of numbers, but we rarely get any feedback on that, or like people don't tell us to make these. The people that reach out to tell us, hey, please talk about this or that, they want different things usually. So it seems to be two different kinds of people in a way. So the ones that interact with us and send us messages, they actually appreciate the mindset topics, or the songwriting, and or like non-technical things, and we are always excited about those. And we have some episodes where we just ramble on about things that are interesting to us, and it's not really an actionable tutorial. We enjoy these types of episodes, and we always think, man, like the audience is I think the audience must be bored listening to this. But those are the ones where people actually reach out and want more of, but they don't do as well in terms of numbers. So that's the weird thing.
Are there common mistakes that you've identified that people are making over and over again?
Yes. I think by far the biggest one is that most people, and people don't like to hear that, but I think most people worry too much about production, mixing, recording in general, and not enough about just writing better songs and being better musicians. So that's by far the number one thing. Because every single time, I mean, that if something's played really well, and if it's a great song, and then all you do is balance it a little bit and pan it, it already sounds better than, something where you put a lot of effort into the mix, but it's just not a good performance of a bad song. So that is by far number one. The other thing is that people in general do too much, I think. And I have no problem with boosting crazy amounts on an EQ, or doing that when doing crazy things when it's necessary. But I think, at least from what I see in our audience, or from the mixes that I hear, is that when people start out, they think they have to build these crazy plugin chains, and they see all these techniques from different people on YouTube and all that, and they try to combine all those different things and think they have to apply them all. And then they have, 3 parallel things, and then also 2 or 3 compressors in a row, and then this one sidechain to this one into whatever, like these crazy complex things that I don't really understand, and they do way too much. And then it's so hard also to troubleshoot these mixes because everything affects everything. And then when I say, hey, what if we turned down this or that, everything kind of falls apart. And so oftentimes we just start from scratch then when that happens. But that is number 2. I think people just see all these different techniques, don't really know what works for them, try to apply them all, and then end up with like really messy sessions where they have no control over what's going on.
That's so funny. Just that way of mixing.
Yeah, totally.
Because when I mix, I mix and then I go, oh, I hear a problem. Can I solve it with volume or panning? No. Yes. Okay. I know exactly the plugin I'm going to go get that's going to solve that problem right then and there. And so I can move on. This is the curse that I've preached about, in that I love all the resources out there for people that are mostly geared towards engineers, Pure Mix with the masters, all that business. But I do think people spend way too much time trying to emulate other people instead of trying to understand music and the emotional impact of that and how to, make that cross the finish line. Everybody's so caught up in, this template and that template and this plugin chain and that plugin chain. Oh, you got to have this plugin if you're going to even work on that kind of music. It blows my mind.
100%. And you said something there, the emotion and I think that is also maybe a common issue with a lot of people, that they don't even know what they actually want and what they like, what fascinates them about music. They don't even have that vision yet. They haven't built their taste yet sometimes. And it's so hard to hit a target when you can't see it. And so if people just knew what they wanted and then made intentional moves towards that would be a totally different approach compared to, I have a song, I have no idea really, no sound in my head really that I like of how I want that to come out of the speakers, and then I'm just going to YouTube and I just collect all these different techniques and put it in there and hope that something happens. I don't know. It's like I would love for people to pay attention to the emotion, the vibe, the textures they like, the whatever it is that excites them about music, explore that, figure out who they are as an artist, and then find ways to make that happen intentionally. That is something that not too many people do, unfortunately, in the beginning. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about your business as an audio professional and how you make that work living where you live.
Yeah, it's all remote. So I mix for people from a lot of people from the US, a lot of people from Australia, all over Europe. At this point, I don't do a lot of proactive things anymore to get people, and that might not be a good thing. I'm just very, very busy, and also the self-recording band is doing really well, but we still mix about 250 to 300 songs every year, and they just come in from all over the world. It's all remote. It's a lot of referrals from bands I've worked with. It's sometimes label work from labels I've worked with. It's people who find me online, and some of them through the coaching, but the majority is outside of that. So that's the way it is right now.
How are they finding you?
The funny thing is I do pretty much the opposite of what you often preach on your podcast. And I totally agree with you, by the way, but it just happened to work out differently for me. When you often talk to your guests about doing a lot of different things and diversifying all that in the world of audio. And I did that for a long time in the beginning. But for me, the opposite, like the specialization has worked really well. So I, for a long time, have worked in the heavy music and like rock, but mostly heavy stuff, sort of, that kind of world. And then also only mixing. And bands from that world just sometimes find records that they like and then reach out and want me to mix theirs. Or they talk to other bands on tour. Or like, I think it helped me that I'm in this very narrow niche kind of thing. And that just brought in a lot of cool projects. The downside is, as much as I like that, I didn't choose to do that. That just happened, because I was part of that scene for so long. The downside is that I now, after all this time, I'm starting to get a little bored of doing the same thing all the time when I mix, because I listen to so much more than that. I listen to so many other things also, and now I'm trying to explore a couple of different things. I'm just right now mixing a pop record for a German band that I really, really enjoy, and I try to get some work outside of just rock, indie, heavy music. But that's just what people come to me for, and I think for me it has really been that niche and that scene that has worked well.
When you made the decision to just focus exclusively on mixing, and I know I keep bringing up the geographic element of this, but did you have a conscious thought process about, this is how I'm going to approach this is how I'm going to get gigs, this is what I'm going to do, tell me about the structure of your mindset as far as this process goes?
Yeah. I stopped producing because I was completely booked up, and I rented out the studio. I have my own place here, and I have a little live room, small live room, and people would travel here also. That was kind of, some people enjoy recording in the middle of nowhere. This is other things. So some people would go here, and I was booked up. I was renting out other studios. I was driving around a lot and working in other places to record drums and all of that. And I started a family, and we got kids and all that, and then I just didn't want to be in the studio with bands all the time anymore, because that was what it was. I was very bad at setting boundaries. I was spending entire days and nights at the studio with bands if there was a tight deadline. That was all I did, and I was like, I can't do this like that forever, and I need to do at least less full production projects and a little more. I want to have a little more control over my calendar, and less traveling as well. But I had so much work that I was like, I think I could get away with doing a little less and then just try to find more mixing work. And mixing was the part that I, for whatever reason, enjoyed the most anyways. And then I just made that decision. It was scary, and there was a little bit of a dip for a couple of months, but I just knew I could make it work somehow. And what I did was, in the beginning, I used all the connections with people that I already had from my podcast, from my band that I was touring with, all the bands that I knew. I just stayed in touch with all these people, and I never reached out to them and just pitched my services. I just kept a lot of conversations going all the time, and I made sure that I was top of mind for a lot of people, basically. And then and I guess some people liked the work that I've done, and they just hired me to mix. And also the funny thing is, when I started turning down full production work, which was very scary, some people seemed to be taking me more seriously as a mixing engineer then, or they would be like, oh, that's cool, then we will just do whatever, the drums there, and then we come back to you for the mix, because I don't know, it just worked, and I didn't really lose clients. They just accepted that I didn't do part of it anymore, but they still came for the mixing. And
they accepted your new role.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. And also maybe one thing is, I think the role of a modern mixing engineer is more than just mixing. I still kind of co-produce with the bands very often, if they let me. I always ask, and not everyone wants that, but I still help them. Even when I mix for them, I help them, if they self-record, get better tracks at the source. I give them feedback. I help them with pre-pro. I still drive to jam spaces or other studios to be there for one day, see them play live, do pre-production with them. If I can, that's something I love to do, is to see the band live and to capture them in a room before we start the project, just so I get a feel of what they sound like together. And so I still do that kind of stuff. I just don't spend all the time doing the entire production process with them. And so in a sense, I'm still maybe doing a little more than the classic mixer role, but I also, to me, that is my understanding of kind of a modern mixer in many ways.
Tim Palmer, who mixed Pearl Jam's 10, amongst many other things. Tim talks about predixing as a term, where he's like, I'm still doing all he explained exactly what you just explained. He's doing more than just mixing tracks that show up.
Yeah.
When you're working internationally, I find that pricing can be challenging. Somebody in South America versus Europe versus, any place in the world is going to have a different pricing structure. Therefore, the competition, you might be going up against somebody whose rate is a third of what yours is.
Yes.
So how have you managed to navigate that and make that work for you?
Yeah, the unfortunate reality is that the vast majority of all the projects I do are from Central Europe, USA, Canada, and Australia. And a lot of the countries where you would be competing against much lower prices, I don't get much work from those countries. It's just the reality. And sometimes, and I'm very open about this, if I really like a band, or if a certain situation is like, if it's really understandable that there's just not more budget, but they really want to do it, and I really like the band, and I have room in my calendar, I will offer deals and lower rates to some people sometimes. Not often, but it happens. But if I don't do it, if I stick to my rates, I rarely get work outside of those countries that I just mentioned. That's just the reality of it. And even there, it's like I wouldn't say my mixing is cheap. It's also not crazy expensive. It's like reasonable rates. But even there, I get it all the time that bands work with someone who mixes for $100 a song or something, and I just can't compete with that. And so that's fine.
Like to filter the bands and find out, like, do you really want to work with somebody? Because sometimes I've accepted mixes, you have a conversation and rough mixes don't exist, and you just take the tracks and you're like, oh boy, what have I gotten myself into?
Yeah, definitely.
Is there a filtering process?
Now there is, yeah. It wasn't always the case. Thomas and I often had these situations where I always thought I have a feeling for when I talk. I try to talk to everyone at least. I always do. If people want that, and most do, I have a conversation with them. I talk to them in person before starting the project. I want to figure out who they are, what they want to do, But sometimes they don't even know what they need. Sometimes they think they need a mix, but they actually need something completely different. So I want to talk to them before I just accept the project. And I always thought that I had a feeling for like being able to tell if something is probably good or not. But I was wrong so often. Like when I got the tracks, it was like oftentimes not what I expected. And so we started to we don't do that. Like if I don't hear any kind of demo in any way, shape, or form, I just don't know what we're doing here. And I always say to people, you don't have to be able to record yourself properly, but at some point, if you want me to mix it, somebody has to record that anyways. And maybe, and if that is like weeks away or months away, even if you just record yourself on a phone, and I just get an idea of like the songs, the type of music we're talking about, and I also can tell like, timing, intonation, stuff like that. Like that alone helps. It doesn't have to be a technically like great recording, but I want to hear something from the artists, because otherwise I don't even know what I'm helping them with or what we're doing here. So yeah.
Let's say you're doing 6 songs for a band. That first song is always the make or break moment. What's that process for you? Because, obviously you're going to have some bands who have certain aesthetics. I don't want any reverb. I want tons of reverb. Tell me about that and how you deal with revisions and selling that first mix.
Great question. And to a part of that question, I don't have an answer, and I would actually love to hear your opinion on that, because I don't know. I still don't know what the best approach is. So handling the revisions is not stressful for me. That part I can answer, because I use you probably know that tool. I use Samply for that, and it's it's a nice looking player that they can have on their phone and in their car and wherever, and they can leave comments and all that. And so the process itself is not like tedious. You just have to communicate well, and you have to set boundaries so that they know that they have to gather their thoughts first, and then one person enters their comments into Samply, and you don't want like 5 different people on 5 different messengers sending you requests, like that kind of stuff. But most people are okay with that, and so that works. Also, revisions are exciting to me. A lot of people like dread the revision process. For me, it's like that's the part where I really get to know all the nuances and what is really important for the band, the stuff that I've been missing. And at the end of the day, I want it to be super exciting for them. And I even do live revision sessions sometimes where I'm like, hey, you know what? There are 2 options here. I'm not sure if I understand correctly what you want to do, but I would love to try something. Can we jump on a Zoom call? I send you a link for the audio stream, and then we just do that together. And sometimes that's just a really fun way to finish and wrap up a project, and everyone's really happy. So I don't mind the revision process. It's just part of it. The other part of the question, though, with the first mix, that is the one that I still don't have a real good answer for, because I tried both and I still don't know. So is it better to, if there's multiple songs, like you said, 6 songs, is it better to send the first one when it's done, get feedback, and then make sure you don't make the same mistakes or whatever on the other songs? Or is it better to send 3 or maybe all of them, just because chances are that, you might nail it on one song and maybe another one's not that good, and you want to give them a little more to listen to? Because what if the one song that I send out is actually the one that they don't like, and then the first impression is kind of ruined, but that other song would be like spot on? So I don't know if it's a good idea to just pick one and send that out, or if it's better to give them like 3, so that, because if I send out 3, I'm pretty confident that one of them is pretty spot on. I won't mess up all of them. But if I just send out 1, I could be wrong with my interpretation, and then maybe that is a bad impression to begin with, Doesn't happen often, but some of my thoughts.
I have a couple of thoughts, and one of them is based on a recent mastering experience. I mastered a song for just a single for a band, and I put up the first version on Samply, and I thought, I should probably make a little bit slightly hotter version just for comparison. And so I put up 2 versions, and I just said, I've got 2 versions. Tell me which one you like better. And it really kind of drove a different conversation. It changed the whole thing. It was just like they were spending their time comparing the 2 and going, oh, we really like 2, not, as opposed to 1. And I said, great. Okay, sleep on it and tell me if you feel the same way in the morning. Done. Like no revisions on that, which was great. And I thought, I should try that on mixing.
That's a great idea, actually. That's a great idea. Yeah, because it shifted, like you said, from do I like this or not to which one do I like better.
Right. Because the process stops, I think, of figuring out what they don't like and does it sound like everybody else, when I just gave them a comparison of themselves.
Yeah.
And they like this version of themselves better than this version. So I think it's going to work its way into my mixing practice as well, where I, send the same song 2 times, and, there'll be subtle differences between the 2 and say, which direction do you like?
That's interesting. Is it often the case that there are 2 different ways that you could mix a song? Because I feel like the other part of me wants to just be confident and say, like, this is the best possible thing I can do for this mix, and I don't want to do a second version because I know that I like this one better in a way. But maybe there's always many ways to do things. Like
I would say on this, to keep it simple for everybody involved, I would just have one mix be a little bit more wet with effects, and one be considerably drier.
Yeah,
because by that decision, like, oh, this is where they're coming from. Because I've done mixes for people where they're like, I don't want any reverb. I'll barely tolerate a tiny bit of delay. And I do that and they love it. And then I go to the next record for a different band and I start out that way and they're like, where's all the reverb? You're like, oh, sorry. Old habit from last record.
Yeah.
Do you take a particular amount of money up front, or do you just wait till it's all done and get paid at the end?
I offer people two different ways. So the normal way is I take 50% up front and the other 50% when we're done, or when I deliver the mixes. Like, I don't send out any final thing before I get paid. But the final payment is due when I send the mix. But I offer people, if they pay up front the entire thing and I don't have to send a second invoice and it's just the money conversation's done, then I'll just give them a discount and it's just a little cheaper. It makes it easier for us, and a lot of people choose that option and just book the project, pay, and then it's done. And for me, like, there's never any additional fees or any additional charges or whatever, because I charge by the song, not an hourly or day rate or anything like that. I have no revision limit. It's like, we're not done until you're super happy about it. So they know what it costs. It's going to be the same anyways. The only thing that can happen is if they delay the project, and if we agree on, like, I need the files by that day and then I'll deliver the mix by that day, and then they delay that, then I might have to push the project back, of course. And if they delay it forever, like, I had some people, honestly, like, it fascinates me, but some people book a full album a couple months out, and then they just disappear, never sent the files, and I have the money, they paid me, and then like 1.5 years later, I still don't know where those files are. Like, it happened a couple times. And so if that happens, you just have to find ways to deal with that and talk about that within a certain amount of time, I just need those files. And if they then come back, because everyone eventually came back, but if they then come back 2 years later and I haven't heard of them in the meantime and things have changed for me, my rates might not be the same anymore. And so that's the danger of collecting money up front. But usually 95% of all the time of the times is like they book, either pay a deposit or pay the whole thing, and then they deliver, I mix, and it just works. Yeah.
I like your idea there of saying you can pay this rate, pay me 50 and 50, beginning and end, or you can pay it all up front and get a slight discount.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
I think I might steal that idea.
Yeah. Yeah, you can. And you'd be surprised, I think, because a lot of people say, it's not even the discount, that's nice, but a lot of people also say, no, actually, glad we're just getting that out of the way. I will just pay that and it's done. And they're actually happy to just, that's done. And now it's on me to deliver. I've never had a problem with that. And occasionally for bigger projects, they say, well, that's a lot of money up front. It would be easier for us to split that up. Totally fine. And then they pay the second half later.
Do you find, though, that they're on the revision thing with unlimited revisions, do you ever run into bands that just take that to a ridiculous point where, maybe somebody in the band is kind of curious about recording themselves in general, and so they're like, oh, can we try it with this louder? Or like they want to do the whole experiment and you're like just trying to get the mix done.
Yeah, it happens. Like with all those things, most people are reasonable, but it happens, and some people do that, especially when they, like you said, there's the recording enthusiast in the band, or even worse, the buddy who just got his interface and thinks now he needs to, consult with the band and like help them and like offer his opinion, and then you get all these requests. It happens, and then some people just, like you said, they view the revision process as like as if the creative phase of it all like starts now with the revisions, and now we can try and experiment and all that. Some people think it is that. So to avoid that, it's all about communication. So when I work with people, I make sure that it is easy for them to work with me, but it's also clear in terms of what to expect and where the boundaries are. And so when I send out a mix, in my email that I send out, it says like that, or even in the first conversation that I have with them before starting the project, I make sure that they know that my mix that I send out is not just a draft or something where this is like the general direction and now tell me where we should take this, but this is like all intentional and it is a final finished mix, and that I know that it's going to work, and that I also respect what they want, of course, more than anything, and that they can tell me if they want something different. But just a lot of people think I'm sending out an idea or a draft and then they can take it in all kinds of different directions. And I just make that very clear that this is a final mix, and it's all about the communication. And then also, in a weird way, if it feels like in those initial conversations when I tell people that there's no revision limit and that we won't stop until they're happy, I believe that sometimes makes them trust me a little more and then use the revisions less in a way. I don't know how to say that, but like I think that a certain confidence has to do with that. Is like that's part of it too. I don't know. I feel like doesn't happen often, and if it happens and I say, hey, I really think these revision requests don't make the song any better, they just usually trust me and it works. And then the final thing I have to say, when they start this and I get ridiculous revision requests, I don't try to explain that. If I think that it's not really helping the song, I just show them real quick. I will oftentimes do it on, not all of it, but I will pick 2 or 3 comments. I will do it and I will send a quick A/B of what I think works versus that. And when they hear it back to back, most often they agree that it's not a good idea. But that's easier than trying to explain why it doesn't work. That's great. I like that. It's so much faster just to say, oh, you want doing the meal analogy, which I typically do. It's like, oh, you want me to pour the entire container of salt on the food? Sure. Shh. Yeah. Now how does it taste? Oh, yeah. Too salty. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
I love
That's
that.
what it is. Yeah. Just respecting the artist helps a lot too. I'm never annoyed. I will see these ridiculous requests, and then I'll just be like, hey, I don't think this is maybe a good idea, but here's a couple of things. Listen to the AB, but I'm always trying to just be nice. And often sometimes if it's really too much, I just like I said, let's jump on a Zoom call. Let's just go through this and together instead of going back and forth forever. And just the fact that I talk to them and take them seriously and listen to what they want, and even if I think it's a bad idea, I still, respect that. I think that also helps. And most people end up being reasonable most of the time.
Do you mix primarily in the box, or do you do anything outside the box?
I keep going back and forth. So I started in the box just because I didn't have the money for anything else in the beginning. Then I started getting fancy gear, and I built this studio that I'm in now 10 years ago. And I had a couple of analog stuff that I really liked, and I went more and more analog to the point where I just used the DAW as a tape machine and everything was just analog. And then I switched back to a more hybrid system with just a mix bus and a couple of things that I really wanted to do analog. And then now, just half a year ago, I switched back to a complete in-the-box system again with 2 SSL controllers. And I still want to grab knobs, and I still want to mix the way I mix analog, but it's all in the box now. And I oftentimes have, I don't know if you have you probably know it, the current SSL controllers with the 360 software that they have.
No.
Do you know that?
Mm-mm.
They have the fader controller, and then they have this SSL channel strip and bus compressor and EQ dynamics and all of that in a controller. It's like right in front of me.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. I see what you're saying.
And it comes with this software called SSL 360. And if I push the 360 button, a virtual SSL console appears on the screen, and I don't even see the DAW anymore. I just see the channel strips, and that way I can not look at the waveforms, and I just mix and grab things, and it feels analog, but it's in the box. And that's what I enjoy at the moment.
What DAW do you use?
Cubase.
That seems to be a very European-centric DAW.
Yeah.
I mean, there's definitely Cubase fans in the U.S., but
yeah,
when I talk to people in the U.S., the common thing is, well, a lot of people in Europe use Cubase. I wonder why that is.
I don't know. I started in Logic. I learned Pro Tools because I was working in other studios. Switched to Cubase at some point and love it. And so, and the thing is, I went through the crazy thing of learning all kinds of DAWs the last couple of years because of our coaching, because I want to help people in all kinds of DAWs, and I even mix songs for them in their DAW and then give them the template and the finished mix so they can take that and learn from what I've done to their tracks. So that's part of our one-on-one mentoring. And so I have Ableton, I have Logic, I have Studio One, I have all these things, and it was crazy to try and learn all of that, and I don't know most of them as well as I do Cubase. But also what was cool about it was that I know more than ever now that I really like Cubase.
Yeah. I've mixed in Reaper, Pro Tools, Cubase, Logic. I think that's it. Studio One, yeah. And Studio One, yeah.
Ableton is the worst. I'm glad you didn't have that experience.
No,
It's awesome for MIDI workflow in electronic music. It's awesome for that. But mixing, I just can't.
I can't see mixing a rock band in Ableton.
No.
What do you do in the case that a band says, "Okay, great. Can you send us the session? Can we take the session after you're done?" Do you send it to them?
Yes, if they request that, I do. It won't be useful in many cases, I think, because of my I have a very specific way of routing things, and then also I have tons of plugins that they probably don't have. So if you take my session and a couple of plugins, if you turn off a couple of plugins, things will just fall apart, I guess. And I have a busing system that I like, and some things, and it's not too complex, but my own way of working. And I think if that falls apart, it won't make much sense to someone. But I still give it to them if they want it. The thing is, it almost never happens because I always deliver a package of final files that has instrumentals and a cappella version and the stems, like the groups, drum bus, and all those, the buses that I have. I deliver all of that. I deliver always a master and an unmastered mix, regardless of whether I'm hired to master the mix or not. I always send my master and an unmastered version. all the stems, all the different combinations they might be able to use for backing tracks and licensing and remasters or whatever, and that usually keeps them from asking for anything more. So
I love it. Yeah, it's funny. My mixing setup now, you know, is mixing in Atmos and stereo at the same time. If I were to give somebody a Pro Tools session from my current setup, I think their jaw would hit the floor because it'd be like, what do we do with this?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
it's just insane. Well, all the links will be in the show notes for everything that we've talked about, you know, website and all that business. And man, I've learned a few great tricks from you today. I'm really happy that we got a chance to talk because I'm going to steal a couple of your ideas there on how to deal with clients. I think that many people will hear that. And yeah, really great to have you on. And I'm glad that we could finally make this happen. So thanks again for coming on and chatting with us.
Thank you so much, Matt. And thanks for the invitation. I had a blast. I hope it was useful and valuable to people.
Oh, it was to me.
That's awesome. I'm glad I could help. And I have one more thing. And if that's not cool, you can edit this one out. But
no, go ahead.
I have one thing, and I thought I wanted to prepare something for the listeners. If you want to check out the resources that we have, there's a website that if you go to theselfrecordingband.com/WCA, you see all of our free downloads and all of our stuff that we have in one place where you just don't have to find them yourself on the website. And then because we just ran a little bit of a sale, last week actually, shortly before we recorded this episode today, I didn't want your listeners to miss out, and so you'll also find a little discount there, and if you want to grab any of our courses, you get 20% off. So
awesome. We'll put that link in there. Well, thanks again, and thanks for the resources for the audience, and we'll chat again, I'm sure.
Yes, I hope so. It was nice meeting you at NAMM when we talked for the first time in person, and you had the nice coffee and cake breakfast at Grace Design, so I hope that happens again at some point.
Yeah. Always representing Grace here, with my hat.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you take care, and thanks again.
Thanks, Matt. Bye.